Hello, everybody. Starting the 11th of August, which is basically a little under 2 weeks from now, dependent upon when you're watching this video, of course, I am going to be starting a Jaimini Level 1 webinar course on Saturdays at 4:30 p.m. London time. You can look up online to find out what time that is in your particular time zone. For those of you who aren't familiar with Jaimini Astrology, it excels at showing the concrete realities in an individual's life. So what do I mean by that? The concrete things that will happen to an individual, the concrete aspects of an individual in terms of the ways that they behave and how they react to life, the concrete things that the individual will have in their life. Jaimini Astrology is associated with Rashis. As it's connected with Rashis, it's much more solar-based. Since it's more solar-based, the sun relates to the Atman, or the soul of everything, right? So with Jaimini Astrology, we're just looking at sheerly what the soul has happened to them during this particular incarnation. The things that the soul has in their life, the qualities that the individual, that the soul manifests, actually has. Whereas with the Parashara system of astrology, it's much more lunar-based as it's connected to the nakshatras. Now, with the Parashara system of astrology, what we're seeing is much more the subjective realities of the individual. So whereas Jaimini Astrology might show this person gets married, Parashara Astrology might say yes, but they're not very happily married. And so you can kind of see a lot by understanding both of those systems, and they're not contradictory, they're actually somewhat complementary to each other. So I thought I would share today a little bit of a tester so you can get an idea of some of the things that we're going to learn on this course. Now, Jaimini Astrology is one of the few systems that has what I like to call cookbook techniques, which means simple planetary permutations that actually work, and in an amazing majority of the circumstances. Whereas quite often a lot of the planetary permutations that we see in other books and in other systems, they require a lot of quantifying in order to make sure that those actual things are going to happen. With Jaimini, yes, it is connected to the dignity of the planets themselves, but you'll find that these particular permutations tend to play themselves out more often than not. So I'm going to show you a technique today that is associated with the passion of the individual, and actually more deeply associated with whether or not the type of individual that we're looking at is someone that can be left in the same room with the opposite sex. So I'm going to switch over to the chart so that we can take a look at that. I know some of you have a preference for North Indian style charts, so I thought that I would bring up a North Indian style chart so you can follow along. I personally have a preference for the South Indian, so please pardon if I point things out in that system. So for those of you who don't know what the Atma Carica is, the Atma Carica is an important part of this process, okay? So the Atma Carica is the planet that has the highest number of degrees in the Rashi chart. Okay, in this particular instance, that's the moon, because the moon is at 23 degrees and 57 minutes of Taurus. So we're looking for something called the Swamsha. And the Swamsha is technically the Rashi that the Atma Carica is placed in the Navamsa chart. Okay, in this instance, that would be Leo. And Jaimini's sutras were written in code. So people tend to interpret Jaimini's sutras in different ways. Because Jaimini wrote his sutras in such a coded manner, it's difficult, or has been difficult, for people to agree upon many of the points that Jaimini is conveying. And the reason I'm bringing that up is some people work with the philosophy that you take the Atma Carica's position in the Navamsa chart or the D9 chart, and you transfer that position into every single Varga chart. So in other words, some people work with the system of, if the moon is the Atma Carica and the moon's in Leo, then Leo is the Swamsha in every single Varga chart. Actually, what myself and many other astrologers believe that Jaimini was trying to convey is the Atma Carica's position in any Varga chart. Okay, and that's the way I'm going to teach this technique, and you'll see the accuracy with which it works. Now, this is a pop stars chart, or I should say a pop star from the 60s. I didn't leave their name on this, but this person was very much known to be a womanizer. I didn't leave their name on it because, I'm a strong believer in privacy, even if this is somebody that's in the public eye and it's known that they were that type of a person. I just don't believe in kind of sharing it all the time and splashing their details, especially when we're kind of talking about something in the individual's life, which to many people might be considered somewhat derogatory, right? But this was someone who was known to be very much of a womanizer. So we're going to point out how this person has pretty much every single one of the qualities that makes it so that there's somebody who, quite literally, if you leave them in the room alone with somebody of the opposite sex, they're going to be trying to connect to that person. Okay, so the technique, basically, we're going to start in the Rashi chart. Okay, because it's more deeply seen in the Rashi and in the Saptamsha. The Saptamsha is a very important chart for sexuality, and that's the 7th divisional chart. So Jaimini says, in that case, so when he says in that case, he's talking about in the case of the Swamsha. He says, in that case, in Venus or Mars's Varga, adultery. Okay, so adultery meaning someone who can be unfaithful in relationships, but it also transfers over to the fact that if you leave this person in the room with somebody else and they find that person attractive, they're going to not be able to kind of stay away from it. Okay, so when we look at that, we have the moon here in Taurus, which is Venus's Rashi. Okay, additionally, Jaimini goes on to say, additionally aspecting or conjunct. Additionally aspecting or conjunct. What he means when he says additionally aspecting or conjunct is additionally if Mars is aspecting, or additionally if Venus is aspecting, or additionally if Mars is conjunct, or additionally if Venus is conjunct. That's what he means by saying additionally aspecting or conjunct. And then he goes on to say more and until death, which means it will inflame it even more if Mars or Venus are conjunct the Atma Carica, or Mars and Venus are Rashi aspecting the Atma Carica. It means that person will not be able to stop that tendency until the day they die. So when we look at this, we're looking at that moon in Taurus, which is where the Swamsha is. It's Venus's Varga. Here we have Mars with it. Okay, let's see if we have Venus. Nope, we don't have Venus in any of the Rashis that would be Rashi aspecting, but we don't have to have that. So let's go look at the Saptamsha. Okay, and when we look at the Saptamsha, again, we see the Atma Carica in Mars's sign this time rather than Venus's sign, but it's in one of the signs that we're talking about. That's why I said again, okay? So the moon is in Mars's sign this time. Let's see if we have Venus or if we have Mars Rashi aspecting. We don't hear from Leo. We don't hear from Scorpio, but we do have something else that I'm going to talk about in a moment, and we don't hear from Aquarius. So we don't have it there, but when we looked, we did have it here in the Rashi chart, okay, because Mars is conjunct. Now we're going to skip over to another one, which says destruction of wealth, purpose, and sense if Rahu is there, which means that person can't control it if Rahu is there. Okay, so in the Rashi chart, we don't have Rahu from Cancer, we don't have Rahu from Libra, and we don't have Rahu from Capricorn. But when we go into the Saptamsha chart and we look at that moon in Aries, which is Mars's Varga, you have Rahu Rashi aspecting, which means that person will let it control them rather than them controlling it. Okay, so we're going to move over to the Navamsa chart. Even though in the Navamsa chart, you don't have the moon in Mars's Varga and you don't have the moon in Venus's Varga, we do have some other factors here, which are in the Navamsa chart, you've got Rahu conjuncting the moon. That's going to contribute to it. We also have Mars Rashi aspecting the moon. That's also going to contribute to it. And so that makes it more of an inflamed tendency, even though in the Navamsa chart, the moon is in Leo rather than being in Taurus, Libra, Scorpio, or Aries. Okay? Now, Jaimini also goes on to say in one of his sutras, I just want to go back to the Rashi chart first, Ketu meeting arrested. And so what he means by Ketu meeting arrested, if Ketu is Rashi aspecting or conjunct, the individual will control it or channel it towards something greater. And quite often you'll see in the case of people who have spiritual tendencies, they quite often have a lot of these passionate combinations in their chart, but in most of the Varga charts that we're looking at, Ketu's connected to the Atma Carica. So they're controlling that energy and they're channeling it towards something else. It's not in all the cases, but you see it in a lot of cases like that. Okay, so we don't see anything from Cancer. Ketu's not in Cancer, Ketu's not in Libra, and Ketu's not in Capricorn. So it's not there in the Rashi chart. When we go to look at the Saptamsha chart, we don't have Ketu interacting with Aries because you've got the Sun in Leo, you've got Rahu and Saturn in Scorpio, and you've got nothing in Aquarius. And when we go and we look at the Navamsa chart, you don't have Ketu in Capricorn, you don't have Ketu in Aries, and you don't have Ketu in Libra. Okay, so Ketu is not going to help this person to control it. Jaimini also goes on to say Jupiter worthy of women, which means that the person will not be so controlled by their desires if Jupiter is aspecting. In other words, they're going to behave in a manner that is more worthy of respecting the opposite sex. And this works, in a masculine chart or a feminine chart, either one, okay? So when we look and we see the moon here, we don't have Jupiter in Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, so we don't have it in the Rashi chart, okay? When we go to the Navamsa chart, we've got the moon in Leo. We don't have anything from Capricorn. We don't have Jupiter in Aries, and we don't have Jupiter in Libra. When we go to look at the Saptamsha chart, the moon is in Aries. We don't have Jupiter in Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. So this person does not have the control of all of these tendencies. So what we've seen is that this person has very heightened passion to the extent that you cannot leave them alone in the room with the opposite sex because they won't be able to control it. And so these are the ways to find this in a particular horoscope. And these things can come in very handy in particular situations. For counseling someone who's getting into a relationship, all sorts of things like that. Jaimini has all sorts of wonderful techniques for doing things like this. There are Jaimini techniques that can be looked at to determine how an individual is likely going to respond to disease. Are they going to be likely to have more diseases that ravage their entire body? Or are they going to have diseases that don't do that? So here are some of the things we're going to go over on this Jaimini Level 1 course. This course starts 11th of August, like I said, and it's going to continue through until the following July. We're going to take a break from November until the beginning of January for the holidays. We're going to cover as many of these things on the first level course as we possibly can, but I don't want to rush the syllabus along. I want people to be able to learn at their own pace, and we will move forward at a pace that the entire class is comfortable with, okay? So some of the things that we're going to learn on this course are good foundations for determining career, what career an individual will likely do. And I have some things that I add into this technique that give a lot more subtlety to it. Determining capability in a person's career, whether or not a person will get married, description of the spouse, diseases the spouse might be prone to, the number and order of children. Jaimini Astrology has one of the few techniques that can accurately predict the number of children. Predicting number of children is a very difficult thing to do. Gain and loss of wealth, determining the type of home, which interestingly enough is going to relate to the type of emotional environment that an individual is most comfortable in. So is an individual very sensitive? They're going to need more space. Is an individual very hardened emotionally? They can, pretty much be in any situation. These are some of the things you can see from that. Courage and will of the individual, capacity to be a healer, whether somebody can be an author. There are so many wonderful techniques on this course. In addition to that, we're going to learn 2 of the important Jaimini dashas, and there are several Jaimini dashas, each to be used in specific circumstances. But we're going to learn 2 on this course, on the first level of the course, and those are Chara Navamsa dasha and Ayadasha. Now, the reason we're learning these 2 is they can be used in any circumstance. They're universal, so they can be used in any particular circumstance. So we'll learn how to use those appropriately in order to predict things. So if you're interested in this course, I do hope you'll join us. It starts the 11th of August. You can register either by paying in full for the course or by paying by trimester. If you want to pay in full for the course, it works out to be a little bit more cost effective. That is $899 for the entire course. And keep in mind, this is at least a 44-week course. So that works out to roughly like about $20 per class, okay? And in addition to that, you can also register by trimester. If you want to register by trimester, it's $329 per trimester. So thanks for watching. I do hope you'll join us. And please do take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.